Happy New Year. My name is Ed Thompson, I'm CTO of Matillion, and today I'd like to show you what's new in version 1.25.3 of Matillion ETL for Redshift. So without further ado, let's get started.
So as usual, we'll start by looking at the new data connectors that are in this release of Matillion. The ones that we've introduced are for MailChimp, Couchbase and Cassandra. So let's take a look at MailChimp first. As usual, they work in the same way as all the other connectors in Matillion. MailChimp, we can support an authentication method of OAuth, or we can just log in with the key. I've set this up with OAuth. If I switch over to MailChimp, we can see we've already got a list created in here, and this list has got 100 or so subscribers with some data that we've generated. Flicking back to Matillion, I can see how I would set this up now. So once I've set up my authentication, chosen the data center, I can then choose my data source, which will be a whole list of different data sources that the MailChimp API provides, and any custom lists that we've created with custom fields will automatically get added to this list as you create them. So we can see my customer list there as the ability to list the members, and then if I go into the data selection, I can see all the standard fields, and at the bottom I can see any custom fields. These company, address, city, zip are custom fields that I've added. Set all that up in the same normal way, give it a target table and a S3 staging area, and we can execute that. The Couchbase and the Cassandra connectors are even simpler. For those, you give them a server name, a username, a password, and then they'll pull back automatically the data sources, and then give you the ability to choose from those data sources and stage. Finally, the Cassandra data will do exactly the same thing. So the server, user, and data password, choose the database, and then the available data sources will be listed, and the data selection is done in the normal way. All the components will also support an advanced mode, which will allow you to write sudo SQL against those components for data loading, and that data will automatically be loaded via S3 into Redshift. There's that run. Next, we'll take a look at a new component. This is our new text output component. Text output component is designed to create a CSV or delimited or escaped text file in S3 from data that you've already got in Redshift. So it's outputting data from Redshift as CSV. Now you might wonder why you need this, as you can already do this using the S3 unload component. But the output of the S3 unload component is limited. Particularly, a lot of users want headers on the files that they output, so it makes it easier to import that data into other systems. So we've allowed you to do that, and we've kept some of the great features that the unload component will do, like splitting of files, but giving you more fine-grained control over that. So I've just put together a few examples of using this component here. I'll start with the single file example. So this is just gives you a good overview of the setup. So here we've got our table name, airports. We're just exporting our airport table, which has about 3,000 rows of data in. We've got the S3 location that we're going to export that to, and we're just going to choose so one of the buckets in there, and then we've just put an output object prefix of a single file. We've chosen the output type as CSV, which currently supporting CSV and escaped output, and you can choose the delimiter. You can choose whether to compress the data as well, and how you want to handle nulls in your data. So you can output any special character that you like as a null, or in place of a null. You can choose to split your data into multiple files. I'll show you that in a different example. And critically, you can choose whether to include headings or not. In the multi-file example, I've split those data sets out into multiple files, and you choose the row limit per file, so the number of rows that you want in each file as you split it out. This third example here is designed to show you the output as escaped data, and you can see I've got the delimiter and the data compression set the same, and I'll show you what that output looks like in a second. This final example is designed to demonstrate a new feature that we've added to make it easier to work with variables in Matillion, particularly date variables. So date variables have always been available in Matillion, but we wanted to add some features to make it easier to do common use cases. Here's a great example. So in this particular example, what we want to do is output a file where the name is yesterday's date. So to do that, we've added some convenience functions on our standard datetime object. So the datetime object in this example is this D. That's the datetime object, and I'll show you where that's set up shortly. And in this case, what we've done is we've said d.now, which is a new function that we've added, which will return the time and date right now. We're going to then add to that function, or roll that function by -1 day, i.e. go back 1 day. So you can do minutes, hours, months, etc., etc. It's all covered in the documentation. And then finally, we take that and we do a .format on it, which allows us to specify a basic format for the output of our data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this job now and show you what happens. So that's running now and the data is being output a file at a time. If I flip over into S3, we can see I've got an empty bucket here. If I refresh that bucket, we can see the files that have been output. So here's our single file example, so a single 208 kilobyte file. And we'll take a look at that. So you can see a standard CSV file with our headers. We can also see in the split file that each file has a header. This makes it easier to import. If we look at the escaped file, and I've got a record here with some special characters in, we can see that rather than this record being enclosed, it's escaped the comma that exists inside this record. Finally, note that we've got a file here which is exactly the same as the airport single file CSV, but it's got yesterday's date when it's been output. Okay, back to Matillion. Next thing I want to demonstrate is some changes that we've made to the file iterator component. We've added in the ability to iterate over an S3 bucket. So this component was added in the previous release, and we had FTP, HDFS, SFTP, and Windows file share support, and we added S3 in the last release. This is really handy if you've got a list of files in S3 that you want to import, or you want to process in an ETL job one at a time. So you don't want to import them all together. You want to deal with them in a file-by-file basis. This can now be done. And in this particular example, we set the max iterations. You can filter the files that you want via a regex. And exactly the same as we demonstrated last time, we create two variables, one for the file path and one for the file name. I've pointed this particular component at the S3 bucket that we were just looking at, and we can see it's got the files that we just created, and I've also got this folder here that has some files from some earlier tests in. If I were to go and run this component in Matillion, we can see the component will loop through all of the files in the S3 bucket and populate a variable with the file path and the file name. So those are the files we were just looking at, and then we can see the files in the old sub prefix. Moving on, we'll look at some of the changes we've made to the DDL style components in orchestration. First of all, people that are working with Boolean datasets will be glad to know that we've added the Boolean type to the create table component, and of course that means it will propagate across all components in Matillion. So if you take a look at the metadata for this table, we can see we've got name and age, and we've got our Boolean type for is employed, is the example that I've used in this example. To prove that that's working, and also to demonstrate another thing that we've added, we can also see now orchestration components where it's relevant have an SQL tab. And we can see in this particular case we've got our create table, and you can see exactly the syntax of SQL that the tool is going to generate in order to create your table. And you can see that it's got the name and the age and the is employed and the Boolean data type in there, the distribution style, etc. If I just flip through a few of these other components, we've added that SQL tab to a number of other places. So analyze, if you look on an S3 load, you can see the copy command that's being generated behind the scenes. If you go to the delete component, you can see that as well. The truncate table, the vacuum, and finally the schema copy component. All the generated SQL you can see. The transformation side of the tool has always had this feature, but the orchestration side, it's new. And so hopefully it should make it a lot easier to understand exactly what Matillion is doing and debug it if necessary. Almost all users that are using Matillion ETL for Redshift will be using the run transformation and run orchestration components to build out their ETL packages and chain the logical components together. We've made some minor changes to these components, allowing you the ability to overwrite variables for a given component. If you select overwrite variables, you then get to set any variables that you want to set. I've created a couple of locally scoped variables here called schema and server as an example, and you can pass in that locally scoped schema or server value into the job. What that will then allow you to do is run that job with that schema variable passed in. This is useful in a scenario where you want to run a job 2 or 3 times with different configurations. Previously, the only way to do this was to use an iterator component, which was fine, but didn't look logical from the layout of the job. Made a minor enhancement on the Manage Schedules page. Previously, if you created a schedule here, one of the things that tripped people up was creating schedules that existed within the maintenance window of their servers. Now the server that I'm connected to here has a maintenance window between 6 and 6:30 on a Saturday. So if I just set up a schedule here and click test schedule, if I select say all other days of the week apart from Saturday, I will get my normal successful test. But if we choose Saturday, we'll now get a message saying that the schedule overlaps the Redshift maintenance window, which is 6 to 6:30. This is just to prevent you from creating schedules in the maintenance window and experience failures because of that. The warning will trigger within half an hour of the maintenance window. Another incremental enhancement is in the password manager. Password manager now supports KMS encryption. If you want to encrypt your password with the key management service, choose KMS on the password encoding, choose a master key from the KMS service, and type your password. This password will be stored in the Matillion repository as before, but it will be encrypted with the KMS key and can only be decrypted with that KMS key. The final thing I want to show you is some of the changes we've made to the sample tab. These changes are mostly cosmetic and are about tidying up and decluttering the sample tab. Now, if we want to refresh the data, you can click on the refresh data button and that will retrieve the data as normal. Difference here being we no longer page the data, but we load the data incrementally as you scroll. So you can keep scrolling, you can keep loading data, and this scales better for larger data sets. The row count is available with the refresh button and the row count box. And if you want to apply a filter, just click on the filter tick box, specify the filter that you want to apply. For example, here we've said the state equals FL, so pull out all the airports in Florida. OK that. And then when you refresh the data and refresh the row count, the filter will be applied and the number of rows out of the total rows will be displayed in the row count.
So hopefully that gives you a great overview of what's new in version 1.25.3 of Matillion ETL for Redshift. If you want to find out more, you can go to matillion.com, or you can download a free trial from the AWS Marketplace. Thank you very much.